Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August 1st Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And we have roll call, please.
Commissioner Norberg. Here. Commissioner Kraus.
Here.
Vice Chair Bash.
Here.
Chair Keating.
Here.
Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Chapman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Boyd, current events and reports.
Chair Keating, members of the commission, good evening. Nothing to report this evening.
Okay, great, thank you. This time I would like to open the call to the public. This is the general call to the public. This would be something, anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone from the public that would wish to comment? Seeing none, I'll close the call to the public. And item number 1, please.
Consideration and action to review and approve or disapprove the July 18, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commission minute.
I move to approve.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passed 7 in favor.
Thank you. Commissioner Kraus.
Thank you, Chair Keating. I have to recuse myself for items 2 and 3 as the company I work for is working on that project.
All right, thank you. And you can read item number 2, please.
Consideration and action regarding a rezone of approximately 151 acres from residential medium density RM-9 to residential ranch RR and planned area development PAD to RM-9 PUD for Paloma Creek.
Hello, Mr. Abrams.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Tonight I'm presenting on Paloma Creek. The applicant is here, Mr. Zanders, as well as Mr. Whitrock. Basically what this is the zoning request to go once upon annexation, which is tentatively scheduled for City Council on September 5th, to take that like zoning from RM9 PAD to RM9 PUD, planned unit development. As you can see up there, the blue indicates the Paloma Creek development. The red line is the annexation boundary area. It's approximately a 201 acre annexation. Their project is approximately 151 acres. Now, zoomed in a little bit more so you can see where it sits. And the project is just north of Terra Verde East and West, as well as just east of Desert Oasis B10. Yeah. Part of their rezoning is with the PUD is the development standards. Pretty straightforward. The biggest caveat there is, again, the larger lots in lieu of a community pool, and then the 30 rule as far as the driveways that we're going to 45%. County current zoning when it comes in is going to be 4 dwelling units to the acre. County zoning currently is 5 dwelling units to the acre. They're estimating under the straight zoning would estimate about 600 dwelling units. Under their pre-plat, they're actually only proposing 542, so even less zoning or density. They did have a citizen outreach on the 23rd of October, well attended. The concerns were well, water impact, the view, lighting, and then possibility of an increase in property tax. With that, staff recommends approval subject to stipulation A through C.
Great, thank you. This requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this issue? And Ms. Navarez, we had nothing on this particular issue that you received, correct?
Right.
All right. With that, I will close the public hearing and open up to questions. Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I have one question. It applies to this development and many of the developments in the Northwest that we've been having preliminary plats, and almost every single one of them have wanted to waive the pool development in lieu of either larger backyards or larger green spaces. And now we've gone through about 10 different developments. And we've got, someday we're gonna have about 10,000 houses out there and probably 15,000 kids, and there's gonna be no pools. The only one I'm familiar with is Desert Oasis. I think there's one in the new Asante for the retirement community. And the city has went through and put 2 aquatic centers in, one over in the original town site and one here, and they're probably about $10 million. And if we don't have any pools for these kids, the quality of life is not going to be what I think is necessary for the city of Surprise. So I would like to see somewhere, how are we going to provide an aquatic center out there if we're going to always grant a waiver of the pool? I also look at the price of a pool. My son just put one in, was $50,000. The average price is probably $30,000. If we're selling first-time home buyers, where are they going to come up with the $30,000 to put in that backyard if they're buying a house for the first time? And it can't be put in with the mortgage on many of the mortgage companies. So it has to be a separate mortgage that's paid off in like a 5-year period. So there's another payment. And we're going to end up with a really hot area out there because Arizona's hot and not a place for the kids. The amenities are some AstroTurf fields and some barbecue grills and some shade. That doesn't bring the neighbors together. A pool has the people get together. They get to know each other. It makes a stronger community. We're missing that. So that applies to this development and all the ones that we've already approved and all the ones in the future. I just don't think we ought to be doing that. I have no other comments.
Thank you. Commissioner, or Vice Chair Bash.
Mr. Evans, can you clarify the pool requirement? Is it something like 600 dwelling units?
Pool requirement is in code underneath medium density, and it deals with truly smaller lots and a tighter community. The intent of the code was those communities that are developed in such a way where you couldn't put a pool in for the community or the developer to provide that community pool. Commissioner Smith's comment is well noted. I don't disagree with him, but in this case, the developer is providing larger lots. So I guess the individual homeowner does have that opportunity for the pool.
Is there a golden number of dwelling units that the developer is supposed to put in a pool?
If it's standard low-density residential, no, there's no requirement for it. If it's medium density or high density, that's where that kicks in. And that's where our code sort of has a little bleed over between single-family detached that fall into the medium density category and then a medium density unit that's almost like your duplexes and stuff that don't really have a yard to put a pool in.
I have one more comment.
Commissioner Chapman is next. Commissioner Chapman?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'd like to just support the comments by Commissioner Smith. I really believe that some of the rationale of the affordability, even though they have the land, let's say, to build a pool, the affordability of it, the realistic affordability of it. And I think that when we look at our general plan and we look at how we might modify that to protect the interest of all of Surprise, and that would mean to protect the interest of a community out there that may have 15 or 20,000 kids without a pool or anything. And I think we should be sensitive to that, to understand that we're not just making decisions about this one little piece of parcel, but as we develop the whole area, I really believe we need to take into account how we can protect the interests of this community as we look maybe at the general plan and any other options we might have in the future.
So noted, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
I would like to ask, maybe the city could look, what percent of the homes out in the Northwest, or maybe even Chair Keating could give us some insight, what percent have pools in their yard? 5%? So apparently they're not taking a real advantage of putting a pool in every yard. So maybe we could look at building permits and see how many have pools. I have no other comment.
Commissioner Norbert?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding HOA fees. What are we looking at without a pool, and what are we looking at if you do have a pool?
I can't, Chair, Commissioner, I can't speak specifically of what the difference is, but most HOAs that maintain a pool, normally that HOA cost is higher. Both from the maintenance standpoint as well as, I believe, from the liability and insurance standpoint.
I can give you some information on that. I work in that industry, so I look at a lot of HOAs and HOA fees. I would say the average HOA fee with no pool is somewhere between $40 and $70 per month. And with a pool, the cheapest I've seen that has a pool, Desert Oasis, is $78 per month. And I've seen them as high as, in an average neighborhood that has a pool, maybe $115 per month.
Okay, so we're looking at if you have a first-time home buyer, our HOA fees are $40 a month, no pool. But a first-time home buyer, they're looking at every dollar. And so I wonder whether or not if there is a pool, they're required to pay for the pool, even if they're not going to use the pool. Whereas if you are a first-time home buyer and you can't afford to put in a pool, well, that's just the reality of a lot of first-time home buyers, whereas later they are able to put in a pool later or move to another home when the value of their home goes up that does have a pool. I love the idea of a pool. I moved out here, definitely wanting to have a pool and access to a pool. My daughter's on the swim team. But I do take a look at the HOA fees, and I think if they do become too expensive, it's going to take the first-time home buyers out anyway. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
And the response to that is, where does the city come up? Because eventually we're going to need either pools in houses, or we're going to need a aquatic center provided by the city, which is going to either take a bond issue, and if we wait long enough, 10 acres or whatever it requires for that aquatic center, the land acquisition cost, and then $10 million to build it. And if we need it 20 years from now, what's the cost? 20 million? And who's going to pay for it? The taxpayers, and the city doesn't have that in their operating budget, and we're going to be asking the residents to provide a bond. So.
Commissioner Norbert?
Thank you. Yes, and to that response as well, I think it does come down to cost, how much it's going to cost per month. And again, I think it would be great for everybody here to have a pool, but we've recently looked into the cost of a pool, and yeah, it's $30,000 just for a basic pool. So you go without. And then you can, if you want, access the pools that we do have here. The city does need another pool, and I don't think requiring home builders and developers to put in a pool, I think that's something that the people of the city are going to have to look at, and we need it. We're 135, 140,000 people with a really small aquatic, two small aquatic centers, and we're going to ultimately need another one. And I don't know how that's going to look later, but I think if we require it to be done with developers, is going to push first-time home buyers out of the market.
It's already in the code. It's already in the code now that they're to do it. What we're doing is waiving the requirement.
But if they
We're not
have a lot
requiring
that's-
them,
I'm
we're
still
waiving
speaking.
the
I
requirement.
appreciate what you're saying, but I am still speaking.
Yeah.
If you require it,
We're not
where they
requiring it.
have, where you have a home big enough to put a pool, even if it's an above ground pool, which doesn't cost $30,000, which is what our neighbors next door did. They put the above ground pool. There is an option. There is something that you can do without spending the $30,000, and the lots are large enough to have that. I just don't think increasing HOA fees is the right way to go.
Okay. And I would have to have comment that we're not requiring them. We're waiving the requirement that's already in the statutes.
So I'd like to bring up something, or I have a question here. We're talking about zoning right now, and this would be more of a discussion. And I know the next discussion is going to be about the preliminary plat, but this would be a discussion for the preliminary plat. Is that correct?
This, because it's in the zoning code, is a discussion under the zoning action.
Okay, all right. Okay, good.
Chair, the applicant is here, and if you'd like, they'll be more than willing to respond.
Yes, please. And please state your name for the record, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Bill Lally with Tiffany Bosco here tonight representing the ownership group. And our office processed this case back at Maricopa County a few years ago, so we've been involved in for a number of years. And it was a difficult assemblage, just trying to get all of these kind of various ownerships together to come in and do kind of a master plan community. Before, it was a 5 here, 10 here, 20 acres. And so it really took a number of years for the ownership to bring it together and really have a master plan so we can do the streets, so we can do everything. As you've seen in the maps, it is a little bit of an odd shaped parcel. It's about 150 acres. And I think when you're looking at amenities as a developer and you're looking at talking to home builders, you're trying to figure out what's going to work out here in this area or in any city, you have to sort of look at the number of lots that you have, how many acres. So Desert Oasis is much larger, around 1,000 acres. They certainly can spread those costs of a public pool over 1,000 units. And so when we talk about building large public amenities or private amenities within the community, we have to then cost that out, whether it's a park or whether it's a Ramada or a pool or a community center. How many lots do we have to spread the pain, so to speak? And so when you have 1,000 acres in Desert Oasis or Asante or some of the other larger master plan communities, it's much easier to spread the cost. So maybe the HOA fee is down in the 40s. When you have 150 acres, and then we went through the process to get larger lots so we can be compatible and we can be sensitive to the county islands and the larger lots on our northern boundary. We have fewer people to kind of spread the pain, so to speak, or the cost. And so it was a balancing act on this property. I agree with you. If we had 500 acres and we were able to spread the pain and we didn't necessarily have an area where we had to be overly sensitive and have larger lots, I think it would be much more appropriate for a larger public amenity. In this area, I think we're going to have great opportunity for folks who choose to have that pool to buy the larger lot, accommodated. And I'm no mortgage expert. I know the community that we built in, they offered up a pool option and we built it into our mortgage. And I know every community is different. Every builder has a different thing. But I think that is an option in some communities. What we want to try to do is make sure this is a successful community, and that we have buyers that want to come out, and we want to make sure that it's attainable and that they don't purchase and then they come in and say, oh my gosh, another $200 or another $112 for a pool that I'm not going to use. I don't have kids. My daughter's not on the swim team. And so it really was a balancing act. It wasn't something that we're just trying to avoid or skate out of a requirement. We think the city does a great job with those discussions and making sure that developers keep this in mind. You're one of the few people that do that. And so, but this was just a smaller parcel, fewer lots, and just hard to make a pencil.
And I understand that, and I understand the cost of putting in a community pool and the HOA expense. I guess the point was, you're about the 11th person that's done it. So it seems to be a trend, and I just felt that it needed to be addressed, because if we don't have any community pools, we're going to have a city pool. So the city, if they're going to go ahead and allow this, then the city needs to come up with their plan to have an aquatic center and how to pay for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenbaum?
I just wanted to echo the concerns of some of the other commissioners, and I understand the mathematical part of it. But as far as the city goes, if we have a plan and we want to look at the future, long after the houses are sold, we're going to need to build a community and a city that people want to live in long term. And that would be one of my concerns. So doing these 150 acres at a time becomes problematic. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other requests to speak, so I would entertain a motion. If someone would like to make it.
I move to recommend approval to the mayor and city council the proposed rezone of approximately 151 acres from residential medium density, resident RM9 residential ranch and planned area development PAD to RM9 PUD for Paloma Creek, subject to stipulations A through C, as stated in the staff report.
Second.
And please vote.
Motion passes 5 in favor and 1 against.
All right, thank you. Item number 3, please.
Consideration and action regarding a 542 lot, 49 tract preliminary plat for Paloma Creek in the residential medium density with planned unit development overlay RM-9 PUD zoning.
Mr. Abrams.
Chair,
ahead.
Commissioners, this is a preliminary plat for Paloma Creek. Again, the location map or vicinity map showing the annexation and the, in conjunction with the development. And then zoomed in again, you can see where the blue line would be the proposed boundary of the city when annexed. And then, of course, the Paloma Creek development. The preliminary plat, standard preliminary plat, 4 categories of lots, 45 by 115s. They're proposing about 309 of those, 50 by 115s, 195. You have third category of 62.5 by 115s and 70 by 115s, which are 27. Those are primarily located on the northern, along the rural residential areas. They also have a trail system that's both private and public. The public trail actually traverses through the site and along the north of their site. So these are just the pre-plats. Again, well landscaped. They've agreed to work with the city instead of having very trapezoidal retention drainage areas to work to make it more natural flowing so it looks natural in its state. There's 4 amenity areas consisting of ramadas and picnic tables and areas. And again, to the different sites. Landscaping. And then again, you're into the wall details for the perimeter and interior of the walls of the community. Again, zoning allows them roughly 600 dwelling units. They're only proposing 542. They did hold that citizen outreach with the same concerns. And with that, I'll take any, staff recommends approval to City Council subject to stipulations A through C.
All right, thank you. This also requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this issue? And did we receive any, Ms. Navarez? Okay, and I'll close the public hearing and entertain any questions from commissioners or comments. Commissioner Chapman.
Yes, could you go back to the map that I wanted to look at the one section. Not sure I see it in here. It looks, this one might depict it. No. There's one section there that I'm asking that it only looks like one entrance into the small portion of the community. And then there is an emergency on this particular thing. It looks like up in the right corner, but there's only one entrance and exit out of that community. And if I'm reading it right, all I have is a small map and it's hard for me to.
Chair, Commissioner, you are correct. It has emergency access only in the northeast corner of the parcel, and the public access primarily is through this, through here. And it's reviewed by fire. As long as fire has 2 points of access, they're good. Public needs the 1 point of access. And then in an emergency situation, they can always utilize that. That'll be set up as an all-weather access to support the fire.
So if there is an issue down by the entrance or something, I guess people that actually live there can climb over a wall, or how?
Then the emergency access then becomes the viable route.
Okay, thank you.
Could you go back to kind of the larger part of the map? I'd like to talk about the trails on the north side of the property. One of the letters we received in opposition to this was from the folks that live directly north of there, and I think so. This plat butts up directly to the southern back walls, back property lines of some of the people that have lived there for quite a while and enjoy horses on their property. So, since those folks aren't here tonight, if you or the developer could just explain, what the buffer is between there and what they mean by a public trail system.
So it's approximately a 55-foot buffer to the back of the lots, to the wall of the residential lots. And there's a 10-foot public access trail easement that runs through there, and that's what you see. There's also some private ingress egress that sits along the south side of the
Could you put the microphone just a little closer, please? I can hear you okay, but I don't think that, yeah.
So there's
Thank you.
also public access easements that are along the north side of the property too. And those that are needed to provide that access will stay in place when they plat. Those that aren't required, there's other means, would be resolved with the plat when they go through with the final plats.
I think that answers my question. Would you mind coming up? Yeah. Would you state it from your perspective, please? Thank you, Mr. Abrams. You do a great job, but maybe I just wasn't following you as well as I should have.
Again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Bill Lally with Tiffany Bosco representing the ownership. As I mentioned, we went through the process in the county. So we had a neighborhood meeting way back then. We had a neighborhood meeting.
I guess I'm just looking for just a real simple explanation that people that live out there,
Yeah.
So I understand the distance to the buffer, 55 feet from the back wall of the homes that are built out
Correct.
there to the property line of the folks that already live there. So the landscaped area in that buffer, would that still, that is a public access area, is that correct?
So I believe there's a 55-foot landscape easement, and then there's a 10-foot public trail.
Okay,
So yeah, it's a public-private access way. There was, like you said, a lot of people are used to having circulation in the area. We wanted to preserve that.
okay, so and it'll have the type of rock or some sort of substrate material that they could ride horses on?
Yeah, I believe so.
Sir, would you come up, please? They can't hear you on the television program if people are watching to try to get answers. All right, and state your name,
Chairman
please.
Keating, John Whitrock with the ownership group. There is across the northern portion here adjacent, there is a 30-foot access easement that benefits a bunch of additional county properties. And when working with staff, we're keeping that 30 feet, we're leaving it native. And then we're putting a 10-foot path on the south side of that 30 feet. So that 30 feet is going to stay native, and then there'll be a 10-foot public trail there. So,
Okay, great. That answers my question.
okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, if I don't see any other questions, I'd accept the motion.
I move to recommend approval to the mayor and city council for proposed 542 lot, 49 tract preliminary plat at Paloma Creek in the residential medium density with planned unit development overlay, RM9 PUD, zoning district for Paloma Creek subject to stipulations A through C as stated in the staff report.
Second.
And please vote.
Motion passes 5 in favor and 1 against.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kraus, we'll wait a moment and welcome you back. Okay, can we have item number 4, please?
Consideration and action on a preliminary plat for Sunrise Ranch located in the northeast corner of 171st Avenue and Joe Metro.
Hello, Sergio. Take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. This is the final plat for Sunrise Ranch. The site's located on the northeast corner of Jomax Road and 171st Avenue, just west of the northern part of Desert Oasis. It's zone RM9 with a PUD overlay. The site is 130 acres, where the applicant is proposing 476 single-family lots for total dwelling unit count of 3.66 per acre. They're providing 24% open space, and it will be accessed on the south side off of Jomax Road and off of 171st Avenue. And an important access will be provided to the parcel just northeast as a future access. So it'll currently be left as a landscape tract, but if that parcel ever develops, we won't be able to, we wouldn't be able to landlock them. So the applicant's providing access through that tract. The development will be broken up into four plats. Parcel A, it's approximately 51 acres and contains 184 lots. Parcel B, just east of Parcel A, 150 lots on 38 acres. Parcel C, 64 lots on 17 acres. And Parcel D, 78 lots on 22 acres. And there's a variety of lot widths, the smallest being 45-foot wide lots, and they range up to 55 feet. It's all consistent with the approved zoning and PUD for Sunrise Ranch that was approved last year. On site, the applicant's proposing a well landscape development with a 2.7 acre neighborhood park, additional smaller pocket parks and amenities scattered throughout the development. Also, the applicant is providing a good interior trail system that links all of those open spaces together within the development, and it also provides connectivity to Desert Oasis to the west and a future development possibly to the east. And here's just a blow-up of that neighborhood park with a large turf area, ramadas, playground equipment, and an area for a smaller sport court. It could be a volleyball court or a basketball court, or something similar to that. The applicant's still working those details out at this point. The only outstanding stipulation on this pre-plat is that the applicant will be required to use an approved street tree species in the right-of-way. And that will be taken care of with their final landscape plans. It's the proposed wall plan, mixture of thin walls and partial view fences within those lots that back up to an open space track. And the proposed design and colors of their theme walls. A little bit of a new concept, but it fits within their approved PUD design guidelines. Staff's recommendation is that the commission recommends approval to the mayor and city council on this preliminary plat, subject to stipulations A through CS listed in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. This also requires a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this agenda item? Ms. Navarez? Nothing? Okay, all right. I close the public hearing. Do we have any questions or comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, then I move to recommend approval to the mayor and city council of the preliminary plat for Sunrise Ranch, subject to stipulations A through C, as stated in the staff report.
Second.
And please vote.
Motion passes 7 in favor.
All right, thank you. All right, great. Item number 5, please.
Surprise Center Development Company update on the City Center Master Plan.
Hello, Mr. Phillips, welcome.
Thank you.
We've been waiting a long time to see this, and I think we're probably very excited to see it.
Well, I'm very excited to present it, so for everybody. Let me just get this fired up here. Wish I could see it. There we go. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, it is a real pleasure to be in front of you. I don't think a lot of people say that sincerely. I am saying it's a real pleasure to be in front of you today. This is a culmination of a lot of work, a lot of community input. This is a master plan that has been in the works. This is actually an update to a master plan. We've had several of them for the property, and each time we seem to get a little bit closer to the bullseye based upon where the market is and what the community needs are and how the community has changed. And this one, we're getting ever closer. So what I'd like to do is make sure that as I give this presentation that this is interactive. Please ask questions, interrupt me. Feel free to tell me I'm an idiot if you need to. Whatever you need to do, this is interactive. Ultimately, there is no vote on this tonight, which, but I do want there to be a lot of input. We've been through probably 1,000 people have provided input to this over a period of months. I know several of you were at the kickoff meeting that we had at the chamber providing input to this. So I hope that this meets a lot of your expectations, and I know that there are some comments out there that we haven't met expectations, and so I'm going to try to address some of those head on. But I think as we continue to finish this up, I think we'll be able to demonstrate that most of those concerns are well addressed, if not today, then over a period of time. So I don't need to go into the process. We've seen the RFQ, the RFP, we went through it. Chairman Keating was involved in this. He helped interview a number of the parties. In fact, I think you were one of the few who were actually at all of the interviews, so thank you for that. We ultimately chose Norris Design. Norris Design is a quality, well-regarded group based in Colorado and Arizona, especially for landscape architecture and planning. We think that they did a very fair job moving this forward with our fairly defined constraints. We had 12 different opportunities for public interaction. We have 3 more meetings proposed, not including this one. We actually have two next week, and then one towards the end of August, presenting what we've done, showing the boards, and then getting some additional community feedback. We've met with students and residents and staff and businesses. We met with high schoolers and we met with college students, and we wanted a broad cross-section. And again, for those who were able to participate, really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Additionally, pretty much everybody in this, I usually say the city, but I feel like now I think I can say the state, has my email and phone number. So feel free to continue to use that, and I will try to respond. So the development philosophy is, we've been very consistent about this. Long term, a downtown is a thriving, vibrant place with lots of different uses, and it's an opportunity for connectivity and culture and community, and it's really that community piece that becomes so critical over time. My view, and you've probably heard me say this ad nauseum, is your streets are your long-term connections. Streets are where the cities live. When you visit someplace, you're walking along the streets. That's how you experience a city. So we need to make sure we do those right. And I would contend we're close. We haven't finished those with the city staff because there are a lot of considerations, but I want to walk through those a little bit. It's all the uses. You say, well, what do you want to do in the downtown? All of the uses downtown. They all matter. From the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the great, they all matter. So we need to keep, we will continue to push those that the community wants now, and we have some great projects hopefully on the drawing board. But at the end of the day, every single use belongs in downtown. We also want to make sure it's market driven. We have way too many examples of projects that have happened around the valley and around the country that look good on paper but don't work. We're not in the business of doing things that don't work. We want to make sure that when we put something in the ground that is successful and sustainable. And we also look at this as a long-term project. This is a property the size of downtown Phoenix, and you've heard me say it over and over, ad nauseum. You're tired of me saying it, but I'm going to keep saying it every time, is that this is a very large piece of land. Downtown Phoenix has been in the works for over 100 years now. We have owned this property since 2000. The city, when we started, was 30,000 people. Today it's 135,000 people. So now we're starting to see the activity in the market ramp up. Those are all good things, and those are all going to lead towards where we want to go, but we have to be patient. We've had great experience being patient, and the patience generally leads to very positive things. So, as we look at the philosophy of how we're doing this, that is one of the major keys. So what is the master plan? I don't really need to tell the Planning and Zoning Commission what the master plan is. But we want to identify the key elements. This isn't a site plan. We don't get down to the building level. There are some examples of some plans that are in the back of that master plan book, but that is not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to look at the big picture and look at the key elements, the land uses, the transportation, the street cross sections, the open spaces, the community pieces, and then look at some of the theming, and then again, focusing on the streets. I'm going to keep coming back to those. So the end result of this, once we put a bow on this, once we translate all the Latin that's in the book, we will have a book that we use, that we work with the city on marketing, and that we are ultimately going to be changing again, because that's the nature of master plans, is they're great, and then they need to be changed. So this is one iteration, this is the next iteration, and it's one that we're very excited about. So what it isn't is it's not zoning. We all know this isn't the zoning case. We all know that this isn't unchangeable, and we all know it's not inflexible, but it starts to set that framework. The highlights of the community feedback, it's, as I said, it was really a lot of fun to be engaged with such a wide background of residents and citizens and just concerned community folks. So we had a visual preference survey that some of you took part in, lots of questionnaires. We had table work, drew all over plans, and then we identified a lot of the common elements that people had. So these are a lot of the common elements, and there's a whole lot of them. But we tried to address a significant number of them. The shade, the walkability, the uses specifically. So there are certain things that are market-driven, certain things that are design-driven, and both of those things are in here. To say that we'd like to do an amusement park, I'd love to do an amusement park. I don't know how to do an amusement park right now because we've certainly worked on it, but those are some of the things that the community wants. Over time, there will be those sorts of things here. Quiet spaces, seating areas, again, areas for community. That's a lot of what this comes back to, is people want to experience community. The lifestyle today is, especially in suburban areas, is very get in your car and go. And for me, with 3 kids, I get in the car and go wherever they need to go. That's my life. But they also like to experience community. We like to experience community together. So how do we do that? Where are those places to do that? And so that's a key part of this long term. So favorite images, you'll see those up there, very walkable, green. They have water. They have outdoor seating areas, shade, shade, shade. So figuring out how to create streets in the desert with trees that don't grow exactly like they do in Spain is something that we have to figure out. But we've worked with staff, and we're open to the challenge. In fact, if you see in the book, we've come up with a variety of kind of a hierarchy of landscaping for each of those streets to create a specific character for our major streets throughout the project. Least favorite images, not more of the same. They don't like more of the same. And, I have to agree. We don't like more of the same. And over time, more of the same is going to change. But it was also interesting that there were some that, were very urban, that were shown on a larger scale that people didn't really like. And I think that's because if you don't relate to it on the street level, you don't like it. So it's really that street level relationship that matters. So how do we address these things? So we've identified in here lots of elements of walkability, tremendous amount of shade, green spaces you'll see. And again, on the scale, it's tough to tell, but I'll walk through each of those. We want to emphasize healthy lifestyles, quiet spaces, and meeting places throughout the site. Those public areas like amphitheaters, water, lakes, water is a huge part of this. And then it was interesting because I didn't often hear it, but when I did, everybody grabbed onto it. So oftentimes it wouldn't be until later that somebody'd say, you know what, we really need jobs in this downtown. Say, well, yeah, we really do. And then everybody'd say, well, yeah, we need jobs. That's really what's important in the downtown. And it is. And so identifying properties that are primed for future employment and how they fit into the residential and the retail and the university and the city and all the recreation, those are parts of the master plan that we've talked about. And then how do people live here? What do the condos look like? What do the lofts look like? What do the homes look like? You know, apartments and short-term housing and long-term housing, all those pieces are important elements here. You know, I could just go on ad nauseum, so that's, I'll just skip over that one. So context is very, very important. And this is something that I've made the mistake of assuming that people know the context of this. So we did this exhibit that shows the overlay of downtown Phoenix. And I'm going to back that up just to show it again because I think it's really cool. So this property, again, demonstrates that this is downtown Phoenix effectively from north of Roosevelt down to the railroad tracks south of Chase Field from 7th Avenue to 7th Street. You'll see a lot of downtown Phoenix, as people know it, actually takes up about 300, 400 acres maybe. The areas to the north of that are very suburban, 1 and 2 stories. They're getting less suburban, but that's the evolution of cities. So the evolution of downtown Phoenix has been one that I'm sure the folks in Phoenix would tell you, hey, there's some great stories and there's some not great stories. But at the end of it, what we have is a city center that has really started to get its legs 100+ years after its founding. Our goal is obviously to beat that mark and put in the elements that are in place, understanding that we need to have successes today. So where are we in the book? Let's look at land uses. And again, it's very flexible. Everybody knows that the zoning on here is extraordinarily flexible, but in order to market, we've identified some more specific pieces. So commercial retail areas up along Bell Road, medical on the southeast corner, but again, mixed use, identified as mixed use, because truly, if this is going to be a 24/7 downtown, the number is somewhere between 50 and 65% of the property needs to be residential in nature. But it can also be vertically stacked mixed use. So we want to make sure that it's clear we anticipate a lot of different uses in a lot of different places. If you look at the right along Luke Parkway, we'll go here on the north side of Paradise Lane, we identify mixed use resort residential. And we have a water concept for that we've been working with the city. So some of those things are going to take time, but if they're worth having, they're worth being patient. So, so this gives you an overall concept of the master plan. So we want to talk about walkability, want to talk about green space, lakes. So the concept right now that we're working on with the city and staff is some of the most knowledgeable people about water law, water use, sustainable water use in the state are in this city. So I think everybody here should be very blessed that is the situation. So we are looking at a recharge project that also acts as a retention project as well as a public amenity. So we want each of these lakes to be very publicly accessible, want those to be part of the city park system. This linear park, which it doesn't look like much on this scale, is almost a mile long and well over 100 feet wide with a stream, an active stream that runs and connects these bodies of water. I will tell you, we looked at a lot of different configurations knowing that we had access to water. We looked at a canal system, trying to figure out how to do San Antonio Riverwalk. The challenges were not flat. Believe it or not, there's 35 feet of fall from the northwest corner to the southeast corner. There's 15 feet that runs east to west between Bullard and Litchfield. And so trying to solve those as an engineering issue becomes real problematic. So how do we use water effectively? Well, identifying those lakes, one, is very public, as sustainable because they're part of a recharge project, so they actually add to the city's water resource. And then connecting those with a long linear park that is more natural, but has active areas and has the seating areas and has the ponds, has those quiet spots for people in the middle of a long-term urban area, but also enables people to travel through bike, car, or even horse if you wanted to connect different parts of the downtown. That's a unique feature that that I haven't seen a lot of downtowns possess. I perhaps I shouldn't, but I liken it very much to the High Line in New York, which runs 2 miles, and it is a great green public open space. It actually sits a couple stories up because it's an old railroad line, but it is an oasis in the middle of one of the most dense urban areas in the world. I'm not anticipating that it's going to be like Lower Manhattan here anytime soon, but we do anticipate that this linear open space will have a similar effect and a similar presence in an urban area. So those lakes become very important, and I want to get back to the location, especially of this lake in the resort area long term. What we've done is we've played a little bit around with, based upon some users that we have on doing some site planning. And yes, this is still very suburban. I will readily admit that this is a suburban model. And why is it a suburban model? Because people have cars and people want to park their cars, and nobody wants to build a parking garage right now. And certainly the rents don't justify parking garages. But one of the reasons why this is designed this way, and we've looked at this a lot of different ways, is the dimensions along, especially this is 146 Drive. So let me orient you, I apologize. So on the north side is Bell. This is Bullard. This is very much oriented towards entertainment, active recreation. I mean, Bullard is becoming an extraordinary destination for not just folks in the city, but the entire region. Just from a recreation perspective, from a school perspective, both Ottawa and Dysart schools have a great presence along Bullard. The hotels are along Bullard. The 8 acres of grass, it's the most heavily used 8 acres of grass, I think, in the state. And then obviously aquatic center, library, all the things that happen. So we have we're working on an entertainment deal along Bullard, and believe me, we've tried to. This is a great example of best laid plans. We have tried to turn them every which way. We've tried to put them on different roads, and basically at some point the tenant tells you, "Look, if you want us to go here, this is where we're going to be. If you don't want us to go here, that's fine, but we're not going to do what you want us to do." So at some point you say, "All right, do you want the use or not?" Turns out that we like uses that are additive to the city center. So with this concept right here, we have added a city park. There's some additional parking adjacent to it, and that city park is going to be activated with things, potentially an amphitheater. We've talked to the Arts Commission about putting a wonderful display of public art there. Again, gathering places that are close to active entertainment. But you see the parking fields along the west side of 146th. Those are designed specifically with dimensions that they can be recaptured easily and turned into parking garages. So once one of these blocks turns into a parking garage, that means much of this additional land opens up for development. Now, the reason that can work is because these streets are designed to accommodate that from a pedestrian perspective. In your books, and I don't think I have no, I don't. I didn't put in the presentation the street cross sections, but you'll see street cross sections for every major street in the book. And you'll see that the smallest sidewalk we propose in there, I believe, is 12 feet wide. The largest is about 26, 27 feet. Every street has street trees. It has trees that, and often they have double rows of trees because shade is a premium. And it's tough to tell at this scale because this is, again, a large scale. But we wanted to make sure that there was total connectivity and those streets actually felt like part of the open space system for the downtown. If we are able to create those themes on every street, add that street furniture, the lighting configuration, then all of a sudden you create total connectivity across the entire property. Now, this right here is not an overly walkable site plan. It's also not a final site plan. It's a concept that we've been playing with based upon a single tenant. So getting too wrapped up in that, I think, misses the forest for the trees a little bit. What I do want to focus on, though, is as we're looking at adjacent properties in either hotels or multifamily, our goal is to orient those towards the street. We want to make sure that those are architecture forward, oriented towards towards those very walkable streets. And we believe that once we can establish that street cross section in conjunction with the city, that is, we're already getting good feedback that yes, they get it and they want to do it. I will caution you on one thing though. On the street cross sections, those are not finalized with the city, because I have heard, streets are too wide. Well, we've got fire trucks that need to traverse all those streets. I mean, and you as the Planning and Zoning Commission have heard that over and over again. I'm always an advocate for narrow streets, but I'm also an advocate for public safety. So we want to make sure we balance those things. One of my favorite streets is in Corona del Mar in California, and the lanes are about 8 feet wide, and there's parking on part of it, and you go, you can't fit 2 cars side by side if there's parking on the street, but it's a wonderful street to walk down because traffic goes really, really slow. You also couldn't get a fire truck down there. I've also lost a lot of mirrors by parking on that street. So we always want to balance out the pedestrian feel and accessibility, and make sure we do bulb outs at intersections to reduce the crossing. But we need to accommodate and make sure that we have proper public safety accessibility across the property. So I think that is I've just spit a whole lot of stuff at you. There's a lot of stuff in the book that's not in the presentation. I think, this one last point that I want to make. So we talk about that walkable street and that downtown and that main street, and there are a number of streets that I believe on this project that could fit that. But I am now starting to think, as we've gone through this process, that 146th becomes a very interesting street, because you start at Bell Road, you have wide sidewalks, lots of street trees, great shade. You have multiple uses. You have retail that's up towards Bell Road. You have entertainment. You have City Park. You have multifamily that's amenitized. You have short-term, long-term residential that's potentially along Bullard. You have hotels across the street. And the terminus of 146th is this very cool park that traverses the entire site east to west, and a lake. So as you pull off of Bell Road, we believe that there actually should be an island in the middle of that with some sort of a really cool feature. But that becomes a street that is less than a half a mile long. It's a little over a quarter of a mile long, but it becomes very, very walkable, and it connects so many great uses. So that's just one example of the type of thought pattern that has gone into this project. So I've talked enough. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. So I had a unique perspective, and I'd like to thank you and your ownership group for including myself and other city officials in the invitations for not only the outreach meetings, but the meetings with Norris Design and the meetings to decide on a design firm. I was the one person that was invited to all these things that was able to attend all of the interviews with the different firms, and then all of the critical initial meetings with Norris Design. So what I can, and I barely knew really any of you prior to this process. I knew of you, and you'd been in front of the commission before. But what I learned about you and the rest of your ownership group is how committed and passionate that you all are to seeing this through and making sure that it's done right. And you have an immense amount of experience with yourself and with the ownership, with the owners. And I really saw that experience come out in all these meetings. So I'd like to say thank you. I know that there's still some people that say you haven't done enough and there should be 14-story buildings everywhere. I know that all those things were talked about. I know firsthand that you did consider everybody's input, but you're also coming from the perspective of real life and how to get things done. So with that said, again, thank you. Thank you for including, city officials, putting that out there so it could be a partnership. And what I would like is if people are watching and they want to know more about what happened in the process, I think maybe one of the things you could touch on just a little bit more right now. You touched on it a little bit, and that is the water. So a lot of people would say, where's this water going to come from? And so I know firsthand where it's coming from, and I know there's plenty of it. But if you could touch on that subject, please.
Chairman Keating, I will I know enough to be dangerous, and I don't know that there are any water services folks here. If Chris Boyd thinks I'm getting way over my skis, he'll probably let me do it and see me face plant on the other side of the hill. But I will start by saying originally this property was identified as a major recharge site. That was one of the purposes of acquisition back in, but really stated back in 1997. That has come full circle. So the city of Surprise has a tremendous water system in place. You over time will need to recharge somewhere between 10 and 20,000 acre feet of water per year. What everybody needs to understand is that reclaimed water comes through the sewer system. That is water that once it gets put back into the ground, the city can pump back out 90% of that water. And that enables the city's water system to maintain its 100-year assured water supply, its designation, as well as grow into future areas. So that is it's part of it's one of the best managed systems I think that I've run across. So I can't say enough good things about how that all happens. Now, we also have access to other types of water here. Potable water we want to limit to drinking water. We want that to be specifically used for residential and commercial purposes. There is MWD water on the site that is, or adjacent to the site, that is surface water that can be used for a variety of things. We want to be able to green up the site, but we don't want to use potable water for it. So MWD water coming onto the property. We also have drainage retention water. And the challenge that we're going to have is figuring out how to commingle some of these things and give the city maximum credit for as much of this water as possible. We actually just went and visited on Friday, was that last Friday? Jeez. We went and visited a project in Tucson that handles the irrigation for the Tucson, well, formerly Tucson Electric Park and all the recreation around it. And it's done as a regional drainage system, but they are able to accommodate, I think, the vast majority of their irrigation needs just based upon water runoff in a 14-mile watershed. Now, that's a big watershed area. But it's that type of thinking that makes this really a sustainable project and makes that water not just something that's pretty to look at, but really a meaningful part of the city's water system.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, my compliments.
Thank you.
This has been a long time coming. I know you've worked your tail end off on it. I know the owners have done that, and I really appreciate that. This is one thing when we looked at it, coming up with the 2035 plan. This was one of the areas of major concern to me, and I know the rest of the people that were on that committee. This and the Prasada. The Prasada is not quite developing the way we looked at it. This, I think, is much closer to the vision that we had when we set it up. And I'd like to thank you and thank the owners for all the effort and the time and money. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about the number of residential units. I looked and you've got, mixed use and residential. It's about 225 acres or whatever designated that could go either way. About how many housing or units do you anticipate? I know you were saying we need 45, 50% residential. Approximately how many units does that equate, this 225 acres?
Through the chair, I would guess, and again, I did the math at one point, and I haven't done it recently, Commissioner Smith. So I apologize for not having that at the tip of my tongue. But I believe that I figured somewhere around 5,000 housing units on site. I'd always kind of had a number of 10 to 15,000 people living on the property.
That's the number I'd heard, and yeah. So
and it comes from the same place. So if we're going to be wrong, we're going to be wrong together.
No, 15,000 people. Then you start to,
Yeah, it creates a critical mass, and it creates that 24/7 downtown environment. Yep.
It's a very workable plan. I think it's a very flexible plan.
Yes.
And if you look at developments over time, they change. And what we have before us is a good starting point. Need those anchor things like the water feature and those kinds of things. You already have the entertainment district identified basically by what's existing there now. on both sides of Bullard. So I think that as development changes over time, this plan will change with it.
Vice Chair Bash, I mean, I think it's an excellent point, and I want to emphasize that because I want to build off that. The idea of creating the streets that are really the heart of your city, whatever the box is on the corner. If you go to downtown Phoenix, go to downtown Chicago, New York, whatever that box is on your favorite corner, that box has changed over the last 2 generations. If you build the quality into it and you have the amenities and you have the civic places and the public feeling and the culture and the gathering places, and you have the sense of community, those boxes are going to change over time, and it's going to change that area, but it's not going to change the dynamics of the downtown. In fact, the goal is to have that improve over time. And one of the things the city of Phoenix has done is gone back and invested a lot in public art and their streets and introducing street trees and trying to narrow up some of the streets, again, to make it more, bring more shade, create more walkability. And so, you know, they've had a little bit more of an uphill battle, I'm hoping, than we will over the next 100 years, in making sure that as this is developed and redeveloped again, that those different components are added to, but added to at a higher quality each time, because people have really bought into this because it's a special place. And I
other
think it's
thing-
those streets that create that.
The other thing I think that is very important that you said tonight, people don't like blacktop. But I think designing that 146 Bullard Bell area that you described, so that in the eventuality that somebody goes vertical at some point, then you have more developable land for other uses. And I think designing this master plan, this city center in that way provides another unique, flexible component.
That is another excellent point. I mean, the blacktop parking is the bane of my existence, and I've said it at pretty much every community meeting. I hate having to park cars for places, but the reality is, if you don't create if you drive up to a place and there's not a parking space, probably you're going to say, you know what, I didn't need to go eat there that badly anyway. I'm going to go down the street. One of the things I heard, it was interesting because in the community meetings you hear a lot of different things, and I heard a lot of things about, well, I want the really high-end restaurants, but I don't want all the traffic. Okay, I want to be able to, I want all this square footage, but I don't want to have to park a long way away. Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out how to rectify some of these sometimes opposing desires. And the reality is, today we're going to have parking lots. We're going to have horizontal parking lots because that's what the market is willing to absorb. Over time, and it will happen, more parking decks will be built. And with those parking decks, we will be able to densify those existing parcels and create more intensity. It's going to happen. There's no question in my mind. It's just going to take time. So parking lots end up being a way that you carry land. And, you know, again, I wish we didn't have to build so many parking lots, but people like to drive cars, and we want to make sure they can go to the businesses.
Commissioner Norberg.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Scott. This is fantastic. You know, I've always thought about this, the way that we have an opportunity here to build a city, and it's either going to go down as the textbook way of how to build a city right, which I think you guys are on that right plan here, because it's a pretty incredible opportunity to be able to do this with a city. I have a question regarding the fire stations. Have you identified any areas that additional fire stations would be going in?
Commissioner Norberg, that's an excellent question. You know, it's probably been 15 years since we've had that conversation. There is a fire station, as you know, kind of on the toe of the boot, as we called it, the spring training facility. But as far as more public, and then of course, yeah, the public safety center. So I'm not sure exactly where the fire department has identified long-term that they'd like another fire department, another station. It's certainly something I'm sure we'll be talking about. Mr. Hoover has a lot of stuff he wants to talk to me about, so that might be one of them at some point.
Is that something that you guys have discussed of donating land to the city for? Because I know you've already donated land to the city as it is, but have you considered that?
We have donated 135 acres, and we actually donated a fire station site down at Surprise Farms, and donated 50 acres down there to Willow Canyon, and donated another 50 acres to the city. Admittedly, I will say it right now, I feel like we're a little donated out right now. We believe that there's probably a place to carve out a couple acres on the existing city property. But it's certainly something we would love to talk to the city about long-term, and maybe there's some trade-offs there.
Okay, yeah, because I was kind of thinking more of the northeast, the opposite corner of where the fire station is now. Well, I think the linear park is amazing because I know that a lot of people were talking about San Antonio in the walk there. I've not been, but I hear it's pretty amazing, and I think that's a great trade-off for what people are wanting, and having that go almost a whole mile is pretty great.
Okay, Commissioner Norbert, can I stop you right there for a second? Because I want to describe what that is and what it isn't. I want to make sure as we leave here that there's not a misconception about what we're doing. I mean, we looked at the San Antonio River Walk. The dimensions were cool. They look good in a lot of ways, but because of the topography, believe it or not, because it's not flat, it's really hard for us to do. So we went with a totally different character. We are not imagining that this thing is going to be lined with restaurants and all that. We look at this really more as it's a connector across every use that's there. We believe that one of the reasons we like it along Luke Parkway is Luke Parkway is going to be a very well landscaped, very interesting, very pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly street. So having that and then having that attached to a more natural open space will create, as I've said, an oasis. But we also, because of the water, we have an opportunity to create a dramatic entrance off of Bullard. So having this open space, having the street, and then having that water feature there, suddenly that, again, plays off of the investment the city has made in Bullard already. I just don't want people to get this impression, oh, you're going to line it with cool cafes. And, well, that's maybe someday. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but currently that is not the plan. But as we know, plans change.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure I touched base.
No, that's fine. No, I do. I think that it is going to be great just being able to walk and having, like what you were talking about earlier, places to sit. And also I wanted to make a comment about the community outreach. I mean, I don't know of any other place where I've ever been asked to have input onto a private industry like this. And so I think that was, pretty incredible that you guys did that and took the time and the effort and the money to involve the community in what you're looking at. One other real quick question though, you had mentioned that there are other cities that have built projects that don't work. Was any of those, or were any of those projects recommended for this? And you're like, okay, other cities have tried that. And I've been to other places where they've put up, for example, the lofts where you have the stores underneath, and they've been sitting there like that for a very long time, and they're having a difficult time getting people not just to come in with a commercial, but also people renting above. Are you seeing that might be changing? And again, are there any other projects that were recommended that you're thinking will not work?
Commissioner Norberg, we've looked at a lot of different projects for this, and when you say, are there projects that won't work? There are a lot of things that won't work on the site today that will long-term. I mean, I would say it's going to be tough to do live-work units with office or retail on the bottom and 3 to 4 stories on the top of that today. It's tough. Construction costs are too much. People aren't willing to rent them for that much, and locations are a challenge. And those are also a challenge from garbage pickup and parking and all those things that everybody always talks about. Not that they're not possible, not that they won't happen, but today you would say this is not that market yet. There are certain retail projects, and we've had to, and I don't want to call a bunch out because some are making a good try and a good go of it, and it's just taken a few iterations. But we want to make sure, I think the bottom line is we want to make sure that every project we do on this is additive. And yes, we've made mistakes. I would say not very many. Our biggest goal has been to not screw it up for a period of time. I know there's some concern about a tire store, right? You didn't have to say it. I get it.
I didn't say it.
But we are dealing with that hopefully, and we'll see some good things happen out of that project too. But The goal is to make every project additive and to take every project a step towards meeting our goal. So the Rangers deal that's under construction right now, that meets a lot of goals. That gets people living on the property. That gets more critical mass. That gets height. That helps the spring training facility. I mean, that's a great additive project. What Ottawa is doing right now, those things are all additive. The first dorms, the recreation facility. So while some of these projects may seem small, I mean, we've got a project coming forward that's not huge, but it's 180 residential units. Those are the first apartments that are going to be built on this property. It's a 4-story project. It's going to be additive and successful on this property. So the concept is we want to make sure we are not, we're not a build it and they will come type firm. That's not what we do. I think we have a medical building that's sitting over on Litchfield Road that they built it and they didn't come yet. They're coming one of these days, but so we want to make sure that everything that we do is additive and everything that we do is brings us closer to those long-term goals. So is something going to work today? Are some of these things going to work today? No, some of them aren't. Are they going to work 10 years from now? Yeah. Are some of them going to work 20 years from now? Yes. And we are going to be patient and able to accommodate those uses when it's time. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question. I just started talking.
If you need me to cut you off in the next
Please,
time,
Mr. Chairman, that's...
You're always the first to say that you talk too much. Commissioner Chapman.
Yes. Thank you for your, excuse me. Thank you for your presentation. I think a nice job again.
Thank you.
One of the things that has been mentioned, after you have 3 more public input sessions that,
yes,
in the community. And I was wondering, following the last of those, what is the next steps that you'll be taking to consolidate the information, present it, and then any form of some kind of implementation strategy that you might have?
No, thank you for the question, Commissioner Chapman. Through the chair, we have, as you stated, we have 3 more kind of outreach meetings where we're going to present several of the boards from the master plan, and we want to get some feedback on those, especially really the streets. I want to understand how people are reacting to those, see if they understand them, see if they buy into them. But ultimately, after we finish that, I'm working on translating all the Latin that's in your books right now. That's almost done. It's been a long process. No, I will be writing in English all the finished writing, all the sections in there, and that'll give a little more texture to all the exhibits. And after we have a couple different exhibits we need to tweak. We need to have a regional map in there, so we have a little more context. We need to have a map comparison to downtown Phoenix, so people are carrying that around and understand that. And then we might have a little more modeling we're going to do. I don't know. We have to talk about that. But then it's finalized, and we've kind of the next step after we have a book that we say we're done. We've kind of taken this step, the master plan. Then we're going to go and sit down with the city staff on implementation on a number of those things. So they have the draft up on the website. They're going to put the full version on the website when it's finished. We are going to put together some marketing materials that are co-marketing, and then we'll have some marketing materials. They'll have some marketing. City will have some marketing materials. So I think you're looking at multiple approaches to using this effort now towards marketing and implementation, and then really what we need to figure out, kind of the short-term needs. We need to figure out the streets. We got to finalize those, and we need to figure out water. And the water, I think, is one of the more pressing and one of the more impactful things we can do short-term. So, buttoning it up, presenting it, everybody will get a copy, city will have a copy, we'll work on implementation. The end.
Okay. Do you anticipate a timeline at all?
We'll have this thing buttoned up by, I would say, end of August, middle of September.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess what's so important about this from our standpoint is the zoning's there. Zoning's, there's a wide variety of zoning. You can put just about anything in there. But what's important to us is we're going to approve or disapprove the site plans. So this is really helpful for us as a commission to figure out, as more and more projects come before us, how does it fit in?
Yeah.
So that'll be, extremely important. Great. Commissioner Smith.
I have one more question. When we have events and spring training, there's a lot of parking on your property?
Yes.
And have you had the discussions as we move forward with what the city's going to do to accommodate that parking?
Commissioner Smith, I'm actually tempted to bring Mr. Hoover up, but I'm not going to. We know that parking is an issue. We know that that the city is using a lot of the parking land to expand the university in partnership with the university, and it's a tremendous opportunity. It's a great use. It's actually a perfect example of using parking to carry land. They're converting it to something that has a higher and better use. Now the problem is we got to replace that parking somewhere. So we've been in preliminary discussions on, obviously we've accommodated on our land some of that parking for spring training for better part of 15 years. We will probably continue to do that while we have vacant land, but I think we've been playing around the margins, and now that that parking is going away, we need to do more than play around at the margins. So there will be a multi-use parking, or shouldn't say multi-use, it'll be a parking field, but it'll be for multiple uses, university, spring training, and some other things. And so we've been having those discussions.
Okay.
But yes, it needs to be addressed, and city staff is well aware.
Okay. Well, I figured they were,
Yeah.
but.
And
had to
we're
ask.
working together on it, as
Okay.
we have on
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, then I'll just close this by saying one more time, thank you. Thank you to you and the owners of this property for staying the course, not selling it off piece by piece by piece. Thank you for having this vision and the ability and the intent to try to make this really something special.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, the next items then are our elections for, so item number 6, go ahead, Ms. Navarez, I'll let you read it off.
Nomination and selection of the Planning and Zoning Commission Chair.
Okay, let's start with Vice Chair Bash.
I'd like to nominate Matt Keating for Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think he's done an exceptional job with the committee and with the audiences, with a lot of the sensitive things that we had, and he's been proven to be totally engaged for our commission in all of the events, this being one, being involved in every meeting, not missing one, being involved in the city, and I think you need to continue as chair.
I second that. Third. Fourth.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to nominate anyone else or nominate themselves? All right, hearing none, then let's go ahead and, did everyone already speak? Well, we're going to do this paper ballots, and I want to kind of set a precedent here. Well, we did this last time with paper ballots, and boy, I sure appreciate all of your support. But there may come a time when there is a split in the vote, and so I'd like to, we did this last time, and I thought it worked really well, so I'd like to keep it going. Write down the person that you would like to vote for. And we'll do the same thing with the vice chair position. And if we set kind of a precedent like this, then in future years, if there is a split and it comes down to a really close vote, I think we've already kind of established doing it this way. Although whoever's chair at the time can do it however they want.
Okay, we have 1 for Keating, 2 for Matt Keating, 3 for Matt Keating, 4 for Matt Keating, 5 for Matt Keating, and 6 and 7 for Matt.
All right, well, thank you.
Congratulations.
I really do
nice
appreciate
job.
your support. And again, I thank Commissioner Chapman for showing me how to be a good chair. I appreciate it. It's not always easy. So thank you. I really appreciate your support. All right, next item.
Nomination and selection of the Planning and Zoning Commission Vice Chair.
I would like to nominate Vice Chair Bash to be the vice chair again. I'm sorry, I have not missed any meetings. I haven't given you a chance to take this spot. Maybe in the next year I would,
You
I
were
would do
sick
so.
once.
I was sick once.
And you gutted it through.
I second that.
We have a second for that. Okay, anyone else? All right. Seeing none, let's just go through the motions and please write the name down.
Okay, we have one for Dennis Bash, two for Dennis Bash, three for Dennis Bash, four, Dennis Bash, 5, 6, and 7 for.
All right, thank you, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, is there any other business or future agenda items that anyone would like to bring up? Hearing none, then I would accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. This meeting is adjourned.